okay? And you can be identified from your fingerprints. The exact same thing comes into play here when different cells fire. We don't always know exactly where in the heart that is coming from, but we know that because this one, this one, this one, and this one all look the same, it's coming from the same site. Good job, Richard. So we call these unifocal PVCs. When you see this rhythm, the correct identification of this would be normal sinus rhythm with, at this point in time, multiple unifocal PVCs. So I want you to tell me when there's more than one, is it unifocal or is it multifocal? Now, speaking of multifocal, let's come down here. What's the rate on this rhythm strip?
80.
80, good. Rhythm.
Like the underlying rhythm.
Okay, so the underlying rhythm is regular, but what's the whole rhythm?
Irregular.
Okay, tell me more. It is regularly irregular, because you can kind of look at this and you see something that is kind of happening in here, okay? P waves. P waves.
Most of them are there.
Every P wave has a QRS, but not every QRS has a P wave.
Thank you, very good. That's a good way to answer it, Sam. Yeah, so every P wave has a QRS, but not every QRS has a P wave, all right? So again, when you're identifying these, you're kind of looking at this and going through and you're looking to see P waves. Where there are P waves, what do you notice about the PR interval?
It's normal.
It's normal, okay? What do you notice about the QRS complexes?
Some are normal,
Most
some
of-
are wide.
Excellent, good. Very good, Claire. Now, some are normal, some are wide. So our QRS would actually start here and it ends right here, okay? This is what you would call multifocal PVCs. Why? Because this PVC, even though we know it's a PVC because number one, it's early, it's wide, and we have a compensatory pause, is different from this PVC even though it's early, it's wide, and we have a compensatory pause. We know that it's coming from various spots in the heart. Now, let me let you know a little secret. This could be completely normal, okay? There's probably something going on with this patient that you're going to want to watch your patient really, really closely. Why would I make that statement?
Because there's the difference in both of the PVCs. Something else is trying to take over, which means something else could be failing, and it's just continuing down spiral.
Okay, good, Devin. Very good, thank you. What else? Yes?
I think it's because the ventricles, okay, the atria and the SA node is already failing to fire in these spots. Also, the ventricles are not like coming from the same place. Meaning there's something wrong with the ventricles as well.
Okay, all right, so I would agree with you, except let me clarify one little thing here, okay? We don't see this beat here, or this one, or any of the ectopics up here because the atria has failed to fire. If the atria fails to fire, what type of beat do we normally see? What kind of junctional? Say it again?
Premature.
Nope.
Oh, junctional escape.
Junctional escape beats. Yeah, you're exactly right. So we're going to see either a junctional escape beat or we may see a ventricular escape beat. So instead of having this pause here, it'll be over here on the front end. So atria fires, QRS depolarizes, we're repolarizing, now we're waiting for it to begin again, and we have pause, 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 pause. Another part of the heart says, okay, I guess it's up to us, we're going to have to do something. And as a result, then we will begin to see either a junctional escape beat or a ventricular escape beat coming into play there. okay? When you get that ventricular escape or that junctional escape, you don't have a compensatory pause afterwards. The pause, and it's not compensatory, but the pause is in the front of it, and it's the reason the pause is there is because the atria is not doing its job. Okay, is that clear? Okay, very, very good. All right. So again, if I give you a rhythm strip like this, and in just a minute we're going to even clarify it even tighter here. Okay, so we call this normal sinus rhythm with multiple unifocal PVCs. Okay. Down here, we would call this normal sinus rhythm with multiple multifocal PVCs. All right, everybody with me so far? Okay. Now, when we see a rhythm like this or a rhythm like this, the other thing that we're going to call this, well, first of all, let's identify it. 6-second strip, give me the rate. Rhythm.
Regularly irregular.
Regularly irregular, okay? P waves.
There, not everyone has them.
Okay? Some QRSs have them, some don't, okay? For the QRS complexes that have them, what's your PR interval?
Normal.
Okay? What do you notice about your QRS complexes?
Some are wide, some are normal.
Some are wide, some are normal. So we have a normal one here, we got one here that's wide.
And shapes the same.
Okay, so we would classify this as unifocal or multifocal? Unifocal. The other thing that we would call with these would be, this is sinus bradycardia with ventricular bigeminy. Okay?
Isn't tight.
Normal.
Bigeminy. Basically, it means every other beat. Okay? The other thing I would want you to put in there is that the ectopics are unifocal, because that's really important. Remember, a patient that has this type of rhythm, we may get concerned about it, we may not get concerned about it. The patient that has this type of rhythm, especially if they've got a bunch of them or if they're looking different, we still may not get really uptight about it, Sydney, but we're definitely going to watch our patient closer, we're going to assess our patient closer, we're going to get a good history on our patient as well. You got a question?
What make, I feel like you already said this, but what makes it multifocal? Because
Okay, not a problem.
I feel like you already said that.
Well, I did, but maybe I didn't say it in the best manner, okay? So remember, okay, so these are unifocal. So basically what we know is that these are all being generated by the same cell in the ventricles, okay? Not sure where it is in the ventricles, we just know that it's coming from the same cell. This one is also being generated by a cell in the ventricle, but we know that because it is different over here, this one's coming from a different place in the ventricle. So unifocal PVCs come from the same cell. Multifocal PVCs are coming from different cells, again, within the ventricles. Does that help? Good, very good. Yes?
So one of the biggest questions I have is like, what's the difference between like a PVC and a PJC on how you would see them? Because they both cannot have P waves. I know PJCs can have inverted P waves, but
You're right.
PVC one that's, doesn't have a P wave, what makes it a PVC versus a PJC?
Look at the QRS, right?
What about it?
It'd be wide
For which one?
for the PVC.
Yeah. So we want to look at the PVC. Now remember, with a PJC, it's starting at the junction and it may be going backwards up into the atria. Therein is the reason why we would see that upside down P wave, or we don't see a P wave at all. But from the junction itself coming down, it's starting at the AV node. The AV junction comes down the bundle of His and then follows everything out on the normal pathway. So that's why your QRS would be narrow. With a PVC, it is starting somewhere down within the ventricle, and now it's having to spread across the ventricle and then go back up. And so that's why when you see a PVC, the QRS is going to be wider simply because it's got a larger area that it's got to cover in order to link up with the conduction pathway. Does that help? Okay, very good question. Anybody else? Yes, Richard.
So multifocal is basically WAP, but for a PVC.
That's how I was comparing it. Yeah. So it's like you take the same like sort of.
Okay, I can go with that, but Ned,
As far as like the morphology, not like in general.
yes, not from pathophysiology. So
Right,
keep
just
in mind, there's nothing that WAP has in common with this. Okay, and I think I understand what you're saying is that within WAP or MAT, you've got
Multiple cells.
different cells in the atria that are firing. Okay.
Creating different morphology. and
Yep.
that's-
You're creating different looking P waves. Okay, very good. Within here, when we're looking at PVCs, we've got different cells within the ventricles that are firing, and they're firing early. Okay, so again, with this one right here, we would identify this. You can call it ventricular bigymony, but I want you to tell me, and you can say PVCs are unifocal, PVCs are multifocal. Okay. You don't have to tell me how many are in the strip. You just have to name it. Now, when we get into talking about cardiac disease, that's going to come into play. That's going to be important because the more PVCs the patient has, the more irritable the heart is and the more concern that we have. Everybody clear on why this is ventricular bigymony? Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, what's that called? Let's identify it. What's the rate?
Trigeminy.
What's the rate? 80. Okay. Rhythm.
Regular.
Okay, good, good. You see P waves? Okay. So when you're dealing with this, simply tell me that the normal beats have PVCs. The ventricular beats do not. I mean, the normal beats have P waves. The ventricular beats do not. Okay. So what do you notice about the PR interval for P waves that are there?
No.
Okay. What do you notice about the normal QRS
They're
complexes?
normal.
They're normal. Okay. What do you notice about the ventricular QRSs?
Abnormal.
Okay. They're abnormal. They're white. They're bizarre looking. So we would call this what, Richard?
Trigeminy.
This is trigeminy. So if every third beat is a PVC, we would call this trigeminy. Trigeminy. If we had every fourth beat, and again, what other piece of information would I want off of this strip if I give it to you in a quiz or an exam?
Underlying rhythm.
Very good. I want the underlying rhythm, and I want to know whether they're unifocal or multifocal, because that's important information. Both of you, good job. So as we're looking at this, what would you call every fourth beat? Quadrimony. Quadrimony, or quadgeminy, however you get it out.
Those
Okay.
are big words. Last year.
It's written as quadrigeminy.
Okay? What would you call every fifth beat?
Quintigeminy.
Jiminy Christmas.
We call it frequent PVCs.
That was
Frequent
that was a
PVCs.
loaded question.
That was a loaded question. Yeah. So every fifth beat would be
Trouble.
frequent PVCs, and you would make a note of it in your documentation that it appears to be occurring after every fourth beat. Okay. So again, if you trigeminy is typically as high as I want you to be really, really familiar. So if you get up to it and it's quadrigeminy, just tell me it's frequent PVCs, or that it whether it's unifocal or multifocal.
I get bonus
Martina.
points as I call it
So
quadrigeminy.
like,
No.
if they was like in a row, it wouldn't be called that.
Nope, we're getting there. Next slide, actually.
If
Okay.
it's every 7 beats, and I call it septuageminy, do I get bonus points?
No.
Same answer.
Dang,
No.
your bonus points
No.
miss you.
Okay. So up to trigeminy, I want you to tell me it's trigeminy. Anything that occurs after that, just simply call it frequent PVC. Sam.
So I think like what we would write on a test for this, you would say like normal sinus rhythm with unifocal trigeminy. Is that how you would say that?
Yes, unifocal ventricular trigeminy, because it is possible that you can have trigeminy both with PACs and with PJCs. It's not common. You will see this happening within the ventricles much more often than you will be at the PAC or the PJC level.